My own brother started stealing my money, and then my things. I reported him to the police, and what happened to him in the end is something no one can ever imagine. I always thought my brother and I were close. Growing up, we shared everything, our toys, our dreams, and even our secrets. He was the only person in the world who truly understood me, or at least that's what I believed. But looking back, maybe I was just blind to the warning signs. It started when he found out how much I was earning. I had never been the type to flaunt my success. After years of struggling, bouncing between underpaid jobs, and living paycheck to paycheck, I finally landed a well-paying position. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was enough to give me a sense of security I'd never had before. Then, one evening, my brother, Alex, came over for dinner. It was just a casual get-together, something we had done 100 times before. Over drinks, he casually asked about my job, and for the first time, I let my guard down. "Man, I'm proud of you," he said, clinking his beer against mine. "You deserve this." I smiled, feeling that rare warmth of familial support. But something in his eyes lingered, a flicker of interest, of calculation, that I ignored at the time. The first time money went missing, I barely noticed. I had taken some cash out for groceries and left the remainder on my desk. The next morning, it was gone. I convinced myself I must have spent it without realizing it. It was a small amount, easy to dismiss. Then it happened again. Larger sums vanished. At first it was just the occasional $20 or $50, but soon, I found myself coming up short at the end of the month, struggling to make sense of my expenses. I checked my bank statements religiously, but the withdrawals weren't from my account. The money was disappearing from my home. I started getting paranoid. Was I misplacing it? Had I been careless? It wasn't until I installed a small camera in my home office that the truth hit me like a freight train. It was Alex. I watched, stunned, as the footage revealed him casually entering my apartment with the spare key I had given him years ago. He moved with the ease of someone who had done this before, going straight for the places he knew I kept my cash. He never took everything, just enough that I wouldn't immediately notice. My stomach churned. Betrayal. I confronted him the next day. I invited him over under the pretense of watching a game, my hands gripping my beer bottle so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Alex," I said, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. "I know what you've been doing." His grin faltered. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and played the video. His face drained of color. "I trusted you," I said, my voice shaking. "And you've been stealing from me." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, to my utter disbelief, he scoffed. "Oh, come on," he said, rolling his eyes. "It's not like you can't afford it." I was speechless. "You're making good money now," he continued, leaning back as if I was the unreasonable one. "I just borrowed a little here and there. I was gonna pay you back." I clenched my fists. "That's not borrowing, Alex. That's stealing." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You don't get it. Things haven't been easy for me. You wouldn't understand." That was always his excuse. His life was hard. He had bills. He had problems. As if I hadn't worked tooth and nail for every cent I earned. "I want the money back," I said. "Every cent." He scoffed again. "I don't have it right now, but I'll figure something out." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my brother wasn't a thief, that he had just made a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. And that was just the beginning. A week passed, and I tried to move on. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started checking my things every day, making sure nothing else was missing. I even changed my locks, just in case. For a while, I thought that would be enough. Then one evening, I came home to find my apartment ransacked. Drawers were pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. My laptop was gone, along with my emergency cash stash. My heart pounded as I checked the camera footage. There he was again. Alex. This time, he had broken in. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. He hadn't just taken money, he had taken my peace of mind. I called him immediately. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted the moment he picked up. "Whoa, calm down," he said lazily. "What's the problem now?" "The problem is you breaking into my place and stealing from me again." There was a long pause, then a chuckle. You can't prove that. Are you serious? I seethed. I have you on camera, Alex. Again. Another pause. Then, the arrogance dropped from his voice. Look, I needed it, okay? I'm in a tough spot. And you think that justifies this? I was desperate, he snapped. And don't act like you're some saint. You have plenty. It's not like you even need it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This isn't about needing it, Alex. It's about trust. Well, maybe if you'd helped me out when I asked, I wouldn't have had to take it. Something inside me snapped. I want everything back. Now, I said coldly. Or I go to the police. That finally got his attention. Whoa, don't be like that. We're family. No, I said. Family doesn't do this to each other. I hung up. My hands were shaking. For years, I had always bailed Alex out of trouble. I had always been the one to clean up his messes. But not this time. This time, I was done. And I was going to make sure he never got the chance to steal from me again. I barely slept that night. My mind raced with thoughts of what Alex had done and what I was supposed to do next. He had broken into my home. Stolen from me twice. Mocked me when I confronted him. And yet, part of me still hesitated. He was my brother. We had grown up together, shared bunk beds as kids, fought over the last slice of pizza. I had defended him in school fights, covered for him when he got into trouble as a teenager. I had always been there for him, no matter what. But that bond, the one I thought was unbreakable, felt like it had been severed the moment I watched him ransack my apartment on camera. By the morning, my decision was made. I reported him. I told the police everything, how my brother had been stealing from me for months, how I had caught him on video breaking into my apartment. The officer taking my statement seemed sympathetic, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Are you sure you want to press charges? He asked. This is your brother we're talking about. I nodded. I'm sure. He sighed and started typing up the report. Okay. We'll look into it. Do you know where he's staying? That was the thing, I didn't. Alex had been couch surfing for months, bouncing between friends' places, always making excuses about why he hadn't found a stable job. It was always someone else's fault, his boss was unfair, the economy was bad, the system was rigged against him. But now, I realized something. I had never questioned his stories because I had never wanted to see him for what he really was. A leech. A few hours after filing the report, my phone rang. It was Alex. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. And again. Finally, I picked up. Are you insane? He barked before I could even say hello. You called the cops on me? You broke into my home, Alex, I said, my voice calm but firm. What did you expect? I expected you to act like a brother. I laughed bitterly. You mean like how you acted when you stole from me? Silence. Then, his tone shifted. Look, man, I messed up, okay? I was desperate. But calling the cops? That's low. I exhaled sharply. No, Alex. What's low is stealing from someone who trusted you. His voice dropped into something almost pleading. Come on, man. You don't actually want me to get arrested, do you? I hesitated. Not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I knew he was afraid. And maybe, deep down, a small part of me didn't want to be responsible for putting my brother in handcuffs. Then give me my money back, I said. Every cent. There was a long pause. I don't have it, he admitted. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. What did you do with it, Alex? More silence. Then, barely above a whisper, I owed people. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. What kind of people? The kind you don't want to owe money to, he muttered. Great. So not only had he stolen from me, but he had used my money to settle his own debts with who knows what kind of people. I should have hung up. I should have told him that was his problem to deal with. But instead, I made the mistake of asking, how much do you owe? Alex hesitated. More than I can pay back. I exhaled through gritted teeth. And you thought stealing from me was your way out? I didn't have a choice, he snapped. They were threatening me. I didn't know if he was lying or telling the truth. With Alex, it was impossible to tell anymore. But what I did know was this: I wasn't his safety net anymore. "That's not my problem," I said, my voice ice cold. "Figure it out yourself." Before he could say anything else, I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Alex had always relied on me to bail him out, to save him from his own recklessness. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. I was done. The next few days were quiet. Almost too quiet. Then, late one night, I heard a noise outside my apartment. I froze. It was almost 2 a.m., and the streets were dead silent. But there it was again, a soft, deliberate shuffling near my front door. I crept toward the peephole and peered through. Alex. His face was gaunt, his hoodie pulled up over his head. He wasn't knocking. He was just standing there, watching my door. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't open it. I didn't say a word. Eventually, he turned and walked away. The next morning, I changed my locks again. And just like that, I knew. I had lost my brother. Not to death, but to something just as irreversible. To greed. To desperation. To a lifetime of bad choices that he refused to take responsibility for. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one to save him. This time, he was on his own. Days passed, then weeks. I didn't hear from Alex again. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. There was no guilt gnawing at me, no obligation to fix his messes, no anxious waiting for the next time he would come knocking with another excuse. But then the texts started. At first, they were sporadic. "Hey, we need to talk. I'm in trouble. Come on, man, I know you're mad, but I need help." I ignored them all. Then they became more frantic. "Please pick up. I swear I'll pay you back. I don't have anywhere to go. They're looking for me." I wanted to delete them, to block his number and pretend he didn't exist. But there was something about the last message that made my fingers hover over my phone, my heart pounding just a little too fast. Who was looking for him? And why was he still reaching out to me when I had made it perfectly clear that I was done? Then, just as suddenly as the messages started, they stopped. A whole week went by, and there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no late night lurking outside my apartment. And that's when I knew something was wrong. I hated that I cared. I hated that even after everything, a part of me still felt the pull of responsibility. So, against my better judgment, I decided to find out where he was. I started with the few people I knew he sometimes crashed with, old friends, ex-girlfriends, even a former coworker. No one had seen him. Then I checked the usual spots, bars, shady motels, places where he might have gone to hide. Still nothing. It wasn't until I stopped by a dingy pawn shop on the east side of town that I finally got a lead. The owner, a grizzled man who had clearly seen his fair share of desperate people, looked up from his paperwork when I walked in. "You got something to sell?" he asked. "No. I'm looking for someone," I said, showing him a picture of Alex. "He's been in here before, right?" The man glanced at the photo, then at me. His expression didn't change. "Maybe," he said. "Depends. What's he to you?" I hesitated. "He's my brother." That made the man chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "Figures." I felt my stomach tighten. "Figures? He's been coming in a lot," the man said, leaning on the counter. "Selling whatever he can get his hands on. Jewelry, electronics, even some old baseball cards." Seemed pretty desperate. I swallowed hard. "What did he say?" I asked. The man shrugged. "Not much, but he looked rough. Last time I saw him, he was asking if I knew anyone who could loan him money. The kind of people who don't ask questions." A chill ran down my spine. I knew exactly what kind of people he was talking about. The kind that didn't care about excuses. The kind that didn't just ask for their money back. "Did he say where he was staying?" I asked. The man gave me a long look, then sighed. "Yeah. Some cheap motel near the highway. Room 17. I should have walked away. I should have left him to deal with the consequences of his actions. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself driving to that motel, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought I'd find him passed out, hungover, the same way I had too many times before. Maybe I thought I'd find him laughing, spinning some new scheme. But when I knocked on the door of room 17, there was no answer. I knocked again. Nothing. A heavy sense of dread settled in my gut. I tried the handle. Unlocked. The door creaked open, revealing a room that reeked of cheap alcohol and stale cigarettes. Clothes were strewn across the floor. Empty takeout containers piled up on the table. And there, slumped against the bed, was Alex. For a moment, I thought he was dead. I rushed forward, shaking his shoulder. "Alex!" He groaned, his head rolling to the side. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. "Jesus," I muttered, crouching beside him. "What the hell happened to you?" His eyes fluttered open, and for a split second, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. Not the fake kind he used to manipulate people. Real, genuine fear. "I messed up," he croaked. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "Yeah, no kidding." He coughed, wincing. "They came looking for me." A cold weight settled in my chest. "Who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The guys I owed money to," he whispered. I clenched my jaw. "And what did they do?" He let out a shaky breath. "Told me I had a week to pay them back. Or else." I sat back on my heels, staring at him. This was it. This was the moment he had finally backed himself into a corner he couldn't talk his way out of. And the worst part? I didn't feel sorry for him. I should have. I should have felt something. But all I felt was exhaustion. For years, I had given him chance after chance. I had bailed him out, cleaned up his messes, made excuses for him. And now, sitting in this dingy motel room, looking at the broken shell of the brother I once knew, I realized something. I wasn't going to do it anymore. I stood up. "I'm not helping you," I said. His eyes widened. "What?" "I'm not giving you money. I'm not paying off your debts. I'm done." He struggled to sit up. "You can't just." "Yes, I can." His face twisted with anger. "They're going to kill me." "Then run," I said flatly. He stared at me, searching my face for any sign of weakness. Any hint that I might cave. But I didn't. I turned and walked out the door. And this time, I didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. Even though I had walked away, even though I had told myself I was done, my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying the look on Alex's face, the sheer panic, the desperation in his voice. And for a moment, I almost caved. Almost. But then I remembered everything. The stolen money. The lies. The way he had broken into my home, ransacked my things, and then had the audacity to act like I was the one betraying him. He had done this to himself. The next morning, I went about my day as usual. Went to work. Answered emails. Pretended that my brother wasn't out there, spiraling into something dangerous. Then, around noon, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice, deep and menacing. "You his brother?" My stomach dropped. I knew immediately who they were. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, keeping my voice even. A low chuckle. "Don't play dumb. Your brother owes us a lot of money. And since he can't seem to pay, we figured we'd talk to his family." I gritted my teeth. "He's not my problem." "That's cute," the voice said. "But see, we don't really care about your family drama. What we care about is getting what we're owed. And if your brother doesn't pay up, we'll make an example out of him. You understand?" I swallowed hard. "That's between you and him." A pause. Then, "You're cold, man." I hung up before they could say anything else. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at my desk. My heart was pounding. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if they actually went after him? What if they beat him within an inch of his life? Or worse? I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts away. This wasn't my fight. I wasn't his savior. But as much as I tried to convince myself, the guilt still gnawed at me. By the time I left work that evening, my resolve was crumbling. I told myself I wasn't going to save him, I just needed to know if he was still alive. So I drove back to the motel. Room 17 was empty. The door was slightly ajar, the lock broken. Inside, the place was trashed. The mattress was flipped, the drawers yanked out and dumped onto the floor. And there was blood. Not a lot. Just a few smears on the carpet, a small stain on the edge of the table. But enough. Enough to tell me that they had found him. Enough to tell me that I was too late. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the wreckage. My hands clenched into fists. I should have felt relief. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was tired. Then my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I braced myself and answered. At first, there was just breathing. Then. Help. Alex. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. Where are you? A choked sound, then, warehouse. Down by the docks. Then the line went dead. I sat in my car for a long moment, debating whether or not I should even go. He had done nothing to deserve my help. He had stolen from me, lied to me, dragged me into his mess. And yet, despite everything, he was still my brother. I drove fast. The docks were deserted by the time I arrived, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the lapping of water against the shore. I found the warehouse easily. The door was unlocked. Inside, Alex was slumped against a stack of crates, his face bruised, his lips split. His hands were tied behind his back with a thick rope. For a moment, I just stared at him. He looked small. Weaker than I had ever seen him. His head lifted slightly, and when his bloodshot eyes met mine, something flickered across his face. Shame. Not the fake kind. The real kind. I thought you weren't coming, he rasped. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over and started untying the rope. Who did this? I asked. You know who, he muttered. I told them I'd pay, but they didn't believe me. I finished untying him, then took a step back. And what now? He rubbed his wrists, wincing. I don't know. You need to leave, I said. Go somewhere. Start over. He let out a bitter laugh. And do what? I have nothing, man. I exhaled sharply. Then figure it out. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. Regret. Maybe even understanding. You're not gonna bail me out this time, are you? He asked. No, I said. I'm not. Silence. Then he nodded, just once. I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I said one last thing. If you ever steal from me again, I said, I won't be the one coming for you. He didn't respond. And this time, when I walked away, I didn't look back. And that was the last time I saw Alex. I don't know where he went. I don't know if he turned his life around, or if he fell even deeper into the hole he had dug for himself. But I do know this. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for him anymore. And that was enough. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.